Chapter 6. Delia, Yolanda, and Charlene shivered in the early March breeze on Monday morning, waiting for the first bell to ring. "I wish winter would hurry up and get out of here. I'm tired of being cold," Charlene complained in her thin white slacks and sleeveless blouse. "Maybe if you wore your winter coat you wouldn't be freezing your buns off," Yolanda replied, as she hugged herself in her heavy coat. "I'm tired of my winter coat too," Charlene laughed. "Cold weather is boring." "Well, you can't say it's boring around here," Delia declared. "You think today is the day the Tollivers are going to do something?" "Well, there's lots of crazy stuff that's been happening in other schools. Shootings and killings and stuff. It scares me to death." "Don't say death. You're freaking me out," Yolanda exclaimed. "I'm scared enough already. You think they'll kick them out of school?" Yolanda had made no takes about the Tollivers today. The situation was much too tense. "Probably not. The twins haven't done anything except talk bad on a dumb TV show." "They didn't even threaten anybody," Delia moaned. She saw Randy walk toward them, coming from the bus stop. "Hey, Randy, what's up?" "Not much. Just the cold. And I'm hungry. I didn't have time to eat breakfast. Any of you lovely ladies got any munchies?" He looked directly at Delia as he spoke. "So now we're lovely ladies, huh?" Charlene teased. Delia pulled a Twinkie out of her lunch bag. Randy grabbed it and with his mouth full said, "If you got food, you're beautiful." He smiled at her gratefully. The bell rang, and Charlene darted ahead of them to get into the warmth of the building before the others. When the Tolliver twins marched in together, everybody cleared a wide path for them in the hall. No one spoke to them or mentioned the TV show. "My mom told me the teachers met with the school board, the principal, their mother, and community leaders. But since the twins had really done nothing wrong, there was nothing that legally could be done," Delia whispered to Charlene. "Yeah, I heard that the teachers were told that they had to let them go to class," Charlene whispered back as the two boys passed by. The twins seemed to know that and almost smiled as they dominated the halls. Yolanda, deliberately ignoring the Tollivers, asked Randy, "Your dad on the road again?" She dug in her book bag for a bag of potato chips to give to him. "Must be cool to be a long-distance truck driver. You know, before he was an airplane pilot, my dad used to drive a—" "Don't even start with that, Yolanda," Randy said, interrupting her. "I got a headache, and I don't feel like listening to all that. But thanks for the chips." Yolanda looked as if she was ready to say something, but then she shrugged. "I'll see you both in English. I gotta finish reading the next 2 chapters of Lord of the Flies. It's pretty good." She looked at Delia as if to offer help if needed, but Delia, with just a slight movement, shook her head to say no. Yolanda disappeared into the crowded hallway. "You were jumping good on Saturday, Delia," Randy said. "You're dynamite on the speed jump." "It makes me feel good when I jump, like I got power or something." "Yeah, I feel ya. Like when I'm playing football and I make a tackle, and the little boys from the box comes drifting over the field. 'Tackle, young blood.' And I feel like $1,000,000, which I could use right now," he added with a sigh. "I remember your dad came to every single game you played this fall." "Yeah, me and my dad are tight," Randy said with a smile. "He fixed his driving schedule so he could be here to see me play. I kept telling him it was just a stupid junior high game, but he said if his boy was in it, it wasn't stupid." "It must be rough when he's on the road. How long does he stay gone?" Delia asked as they walked to their lockers. "Oh, usually not more than 2 or 3 days. Sometimes if he gets a special haul, like California, he might be gone for a week, but he tries not to do that. But he always leaves me food and money, and he calls me every night. We got it worked out." "I admire you," Delia said shyly. "I'd be scared to be at home alone." "What's to be scared of? Besides, I got my attack cat to protect me," Randy said, laughing. "Home is safe. It's school I'm scared of. Those Tollivers are some scary dudes." "You got that right," Delia shivered, in spite of the warmth of the overheated halls. "I meant what I said the other night, Delia." Randy was looking directly at her. "I'll protect you." Delia had to look away. She was trembling once more, but not from the cold and not from fear. Randy's voice had made her shiver. She smiled at him. "Thanks, Randy. I'll see you in English." He grinned and disappeared up the steps to his next class. Delia glanced at herself in her locker mirror just before she closed the door. She was still smiling. During her first Bell math class, Delia listened to the buzz of whispers about the Tollivers and their television appearance. The twins arrived late to her math class, with a tardy slip from the office. They said nothing as they tossed the green slip of paper on Mr. Bernaldi's desk. He glanced at them and continued his discussion of polynomials. Another teacher knocked on the door a few minutes later, and the two of them spoke in voices too low for the students to hear, but Delia could see Mr. Bernaldi glancing back at the Tolliver boys. The rest of the students took this brief respite from class to make their own whispered comments. I heard they tried to suspend them, but they couldn't. I heard the twins are really mad and are going to get somebody. Delia said nothing, but she peeked back at Taboo and Titan. They were looking out of the window, seeming to ignore the turmoil, but Delia had a feeling they were enjoying it. Mr. Bernaldi closed the door and returned to the front of the class. Let's get back to work now. Delia, can you tell me the answer to number 3? Delia glanced at the problem. She thought for the 100th time how easy math was for her, and wondered why reading was so impossible. 17, she said with assurance. Good job, Delia, Mr. Bernaldi said, smiling. She turned to the twins, and a look of challenge and determination on his face. Taboo, can you tell me the answer to number 4? Mr. Bernaldi is not about to be intimidated, Delia thought, turning around in her seat to see what would happen. 249.5, Taboo replied defiantly, as if answering the challenge. He had barely glanced at his book. Mr. Bernaldi looked down at his notes to double-check the answer. You're correct, Taboo, he said quietly. Good job. Even though the twins rarely participated in class activities, Delia noticed they made good grades. They were smarter than they let on to be. When teachers passed back papers in grade order from highest to lowest, a practice Delia hated, she noticed that the Tolliver twins usually had papers in the top of the stack, and she usually had papers in the bottom. Maybe if I had a twin, Delia thought, I'd get better grades. 2 brains have got to be better than 1. Before Delia's social studies class, the next bell, the students huddled together in groups, whispering and spreading the little information they knew. Titan and Taboo were not in this class. Then the bell rang, and Mrs. Parks, a tall, powerful African-American woman who wore a colorful African garment to each class, tossed aside her textbook and said, Okay, you need to talk, so let's talk. This is what social studies is all about, people and problems. I know you all saw the TV show last week, and it always amazes me what you watch when you get home, and I know you're concerned. Without making accusations or false statements, let's discuss what's going on. Melissa, you look worried. Melissa, a skinny, quiet girl with braces and stringy blonde hair, said softly, I'm afraid of them, the twins. Have they ever done anything to make you feel that way? Asked Mrs. Parks. No, Melissa admitted, but one day they passed me in the hall and they... Go on, Mrs. Parks said gently. What happened? They growled at me, Melissa said quickly, as if she was embarrassed. The rest of the class started to laugh, but one look from Mrs. Parks silenced them. That frightened you? Mrs. Parks asked quietly. Melissa nodded, head down. They pushed me against the lockers when they passed me in the hall, Delia offered next. I don't like feeling scared, and I don't like people who are rude. You bring up an important point, Delia, Mrs. Parks said. Rather than talk about any specific people, let's talk about fear and aggression and what it does to us. If you look at events in our history book, you'll see that wars have sometimes started simply because of some folks who were too aggressive and others who were too fearful. Look at what Hitler did, she offered. So we gonna have a war here at school? Asked Aziz, the tallest boy in the 8th grade. Of course not, Mrs. Parks assured the class. But if we understand what causes problems, perhaps we can work to fix them before the situation gets out of hand. So what do we do? Delia asked. Has anybody ever talked to the Tollivers? Tried to make friends with them? Asked Jessie, who had transferred to the school shortly after the twins. No way, man, Aziz told him. You want to get iced? Wait, Jessie has a point, Mrs. Parks insisted. Sometimes the best way to destroy an enemy is by making friends with him. It's probably very hard to transfer into a school when the school year has already started. You got that right, said Jessie. But everyone was really straight up with me. Helped me find my way around school. Told me what teachers were stupid and which were cool. They told me you were one of the cool ones, Mrs. Parks, he added with a grin. Mrs. Parks rolled her eyes and called on Aziz again, who was waving his hand wildly. Yeah, but Jessie came in here without an attitude. Nobody was scared of him from day one, Aziz reminded the class. We keep going back to the idea of fear, Mrs. Parks commented. From what I can see, all of you are excited about being afraid. It's like the cool thing to do. I've known people to be frightened of me when they see me in an elevator. The class chuckled. If I hadn't done my homework and I saw you in an elevator, I guess I'd be scared too, joked Quinn, a boy who rarely did his homework on time. Mrs. Parks laughed and told him, "Anytime you see me, Quinn, you'd better be afraid, because one of these days I'm going to show up at your house, right around dinner time, and ask your mother why you can't remember your homework." Quinn jumped from his seat and fell on his knees. "Oh, please, not the your mama visit at dinner torture. Anything but that. I promise I'll be good." "Get up, Quinn," Mrs. Parks said, laughing. "Which reminds me, class, get out your homework." Everybody groaned as they dug for their papers, but it seemed to Delia that everyone felt better, because Mrs. Parks had loosened a bit of the tension they all felt. Quinn, of course, didn't have his homework, but Delia was glad that the attention was on him. She had not done her homework either. It was a reading assignment on Egyptian culture, along with several questions to answer. Delia figured that she could learn as much as she needed by listening in class and would make up for the missed homework assignment grade by offering to do an extra project, maybe a model of a pyramid or a mummy. But most of the class period had been taken up with the discussion of the Tolliver problem. Mrs. Parks had time only for a brief discussion of Egypt before the bell rang. The homework was to read the next chapter. She might never get the class help she needed to fake it on the test. Delia sighed as she walked down the steps to English, where she saw Yolanda just closing her locker. "You ready for English?" Yolanda asked her, as they pushed their way slowly through the crowded hall. "Yeah, I guess. Hey, Yo-Yo, are you scared of the Tollivers? You make a joke out of everything." They were standing outside of their classroom door. "Not really," Yolanda replied. "I think this whole thing will blow over. I remember when me and my parents were living in Africa and a roving band of tigers had us cornered, and all we had were the pencils from the mission school to fight them." "Yolanda," Delia interrupted with a laugh, "tigers come from Asia, not Africa, and you were never there anyway." "It might have been a dream," Yolanda replied with a grin, "but it seemed very real." "It's not a lie if you really believe it, is it?" "Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between the truth and a lie," Delia mused, "and it doesn't really matter who believes it."